I have two mommies, she proudly exclaimed in that resounding voice that only a toddler can master. That kind of voice that demands attention and seems to have a permanently broken volume control. There, standing in the grocery checkout line early on a Saturday morning, my then 2-year-old daughter, Nora, had once again decided that the friendly cashier who had innocently asked how old she was really wanted to know if she had a mommy and a daddy. This scene had played out several times over the preceding weeks in the bank line, at the shoe store, in the doctor's office. Nora seemed to be wholly possessed by this fact of her life, and she felt inclined to share that news with anyone and everyone who dared venture within 30 feet of her. As every time before, the scene proceeded much like a scripted play. The cashier's smile skewed a bit, and she looked at me, searching, with confusion written all over her face. "What did you say, honey?" And like every time before, I jumped in quickly. "Oh, you know toddlers. Who knows what she says? I swear I can't understand her half the time. My, what a beautiful ring you're wearing." Only this time was different. This time, my precious daughter sat in the cart in front of me at eye level. This time, I couldn't help but catch her gaze and see the confusion starting to take root. This time, I felt the anguish of a parent who wished that I hadn't taught my child a lesson, that lesson that I wished I could instantly take back. In that moment of rapid diversion, the verbal sleight of hand, the redirection of a potentially uncomfortable confrontation, I had taught my daughter the beginning steps of a dance I swore to protect her from. I had made a quick decision to neatly pack up that moment in a box, to tie it with a pretty ribbon, one that made my existence as both a parent and a lesbian easier for the world to digest, or better yet, just ignore. Now, from the earliest of ages, we're taught to put things into categories. Any Sesame Street fan or a parent of a Sesame Street fan probably knows that famous song, "One of these things is not like the other. One of these things just does not belong." From early as 1 year of age, children are able to distinguish difference. And those categories provide our life with order, structure, and understanding, even comfort. They let us know where things or people belong. I imagine that I, like most people, have spent a great deal of time thinking about where I belong. And I've been with you to help you think about who belongs with you in this community, in your pulpit. I've helped you unpack your boxes to see what is held and maybe what is hiding inside of them. You should know a little bit about me. First, I grew up in Alabama, the first grandchild in a large and proper Southern family. I was brought up to be attentive to all of life's best Southern graces, and I can still set a formal table with my eyes closed. I attended college, was active in my community, and I performed in voice, theater, and concert symphony. I was the apple of my family's eye, and I sat on a pedestal that was not only high, but precariously grounded in my ability to do no wrong, and for God's sake, not embarrass the family in any way. Needless to say, my fall from that pedestal was a long but quick descent. I was 22 years old when I came out as a lesbian and gay rights activist on CNN. Yeah, you heard me right. CNN, your source for up-to-the-minute news. I'll admit that my decision to give an interview to a local TV station at the annual Gay Pride Festival in Birmingham, not one of my brightest ideas. But I had no way of knowing that CNN would pick up the feed. And furthermore, how was I to know that some aunt 3 times removed would happen to be watching at that very moment? and promptly pick up the phone to my very conservative grandmother. The fallout was not pretty. My mother had known my secret for a while, and being the loving woman that she is, she was only concerned with my happiness and well-being. I wish I could say the same for the rest of my family, who for nearly 12 years felt betrayed, ashamed, and horribly embarrassed. Now, I'm happy to say that after some time and great-grandchildren, things have greatly improved, and my family now accepts and loves my partner and I and our children with open arms, at least behind closed doors. I had only unpacked my identity in a very limited way for my family. I had allowed them to only see the pieces of me that I thought they could handle. They only saw the proper, well-mannered, always amenable, and eager to please side of me. It could be argued that if they had dug just a little bit deeper, looked a little bit harder, and quite possibly if I had felt a lot safer, they would have seen the other side of my life, another aspect of me that makes me uniquely who I am. Unfortunately, once they were allowed to see the parts of my life that identify me as other, any accomplishment and identity beyond that was lost. It was lost in the background of my glaring difference from them. Gone were all the accomplishments in theater. Gone were the hundreds of volunteer hours that had earned me scholarship to college. Gone was my identity as the beloved grandchild. They were replaced by an otherness, an inability to see me as a whole person. Emerson wrote, "People only see what they are prepared to see." And it's a sad reality that our lives very seldom prepare us to challenge what we think we know. On New Year's Eve of 2000, I came out to my former roommate from college. And for the next year, she would introduce me as, "This is my lesbian friend, Amanda." I could never decide if that pronouncement was a badge of honor or a tiny warning label. Now, I believe that fair is fair. So I started introducing her by saying, "This is my Jewish friend, Sarah." She was clearly confused, but after a few minutes, she started to understand the problem. I'm sure you see my point. Even though she had known me for years prior to my coming out, by labeling me, she had created a social shorthand, boxing me up neatly to give social cues for the rest of the world. She had also unintentionally stripped me of all other identity. Now I'm confident there's not one person sitting here today that is one-dimensional. We have all spent our lives trying on new identities, casting off those which we outgrow, and evolving into who we are today in this moment, in this space. We have learned how to package up our identities, and when it is necessary, and far too often only when it is safe, to unpack those identities for the rest of the world. There was a man in my life for a time, Eli, who taught me a great deal about the fluid nature of categories and identity. When I met Eli in college, I knew him as Sarah. Over the course of several years, Sarah started to fade away and Eli emerged. Now, identifying as a transgender man, Eli walks through the world on the cusp of identity. Many of the people he comes in contact with remain confused by his sometimes murky gender presentation, which will challenge quite often the social cues and social restraints of male and female. People seem to be afraid of what his identity means to their own understanding of self. Eli spends a great deal of time looking for a workable balance, constantly navigating boxes that are far too small. And standing as witness to this transition of identity, I still see in Eli the person I knew so long ago. There remains a passion for music, an unparalleled love of Alabama football, Roll Tide, a quirky sense of humor, and an uncanny ability to remember one-liners from really bad movies. But regardless of what pieces remain, he spends his life in a constant web of trying to simplify his gender identity, to put himself in a box that others can understand and can handle. Although our lives have long since gone in separate directions, during the many years that we dated, his physical transition from female to male caused great concern among people who knew me as a lesbian. The inevitable question varied in form, but it was always searching for the same thing. So, are you straight now? To this day, I remain confounded by the need to label me. And my first question always was, does it really matter? Now, what I've shared with you are mere fragments of my story, small snapshots of a lifetime. My identity has shaped me. It's hindered me at times, and it's compelled me to become a beyond categorical thinking facilitator. My experiences with identity constantly reaffirm my belief that it is essential to hear each other's stories and to understand each other's truth, to meet people where they are, lest we fall into the trap of boxing people up for our own comfort. That Saturday morning, as I buckled her in her car seat, Nora spoke for the first time since I had hurriedly redirected the cashier's attention. I have 2 mommies. She said it in a near whisper. And as I looked at those sapphire blue eyes that mirror my own, I couldn't help but feel the tears well up. I shook my head in affirmation, afraid my voice would betray me, and I laid my forehead to hers, our shared gesture of affection since her birth. My mommies love me very much, she said. She said it with the assured confidence of one who will not be swayed. Yes, I said, very much. And there, from the heart of a child, demanding to be acknowledged for her story, for her identity separate from my own, I was again reminded that this work never ends. The boxes we pull behind us, the boxes we struggle to break out of, the boxes where we seek refuge must never be allowed to be the sole measure of our identity. There's not a box big enough to contain our messy lives and our ever-changing selves. During our time together, I have asked you to look inside of your boxes, to dig deep into the dark and scary places, to stretch, possibly bust a few seams here and there. I've asked you to dare to share some of your stories. The work doesn't end with the check marks in the box saying that you completed this step in your search process. In fact, my friends, the work has only just begun. Your job now is to witness the transformative power of really knowing someone beyond labels, beyond categories, and most certainly beyond boxes. Amen. Blessed be. And Ashe.